What's up, otakus? Yeah, we today, normally we go on Friday nights. It's Otaku Weekly, and we talk comic books and my collection. But tonight, uh, as part of our API Heritage Month series, we have a special guest. We have Phillip Ginn in the house, and we've had him on before, but this is the first time he's joining us for Heritage Month. So I'm just going to let him introduce himself, and yeah, we'll go from there. So Phillip.
Hey, what's up, world? I'm Phillip. You can find me online on Instagram at Phillip Ginn Artist, and my website. It's there on the screen. I am a writer and an illustrator. You'll find me at a con near you. I'm pretty sure. I've been fortunate enough to do some covers and some interiors for other people, but I've also been able to put up my own books. And the one thing that I also just have started to really notice the past few years, as my convention career has gotten better and better, and one thing that I never really expected doing cons is to have actual real deep connections with people who like my work. I've heard some stories, and it's really been motivating to continue to do the work that I do. So I would say that my work is pretty broad.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Awesome.
How did you get into art? I mean, like first off, let's talk about your career. How did you get into comic book art and comic books? And talk about, I guess the evolution of that.
I actually didn't start out wanting to do comic books, because when I was growing up, my first exposure to comics of any kind were comic strips. So I actually wanted to be the next Charles Schultz, Jim Davis. I was a huge Peanuts fan, and oh yeah, I love Peanuts, and I I wanted to do something as significant as Peanuts. Even as a kid, like I knew that Peanuts was just very, I didn't know what ingrained culture meant, but I just had this sense of how important the strip was, and I wanted to be the next Charles Schultz, and I really got into newspaper strips. So my goal actually was to be in the newspapers, because nobody knew that newspapers were going to eventually, kill off comic strips or dwindle down, and we'd go online. So I started off wanting to do comic strips, and the more I started to draw my own strips, I think my dad eventually let me read some of the comics that he saved when he was a kid. So I got to read a lot of classics, classic Marvel and DC books. I saw a lot of, your standard superheroes, alongside, things like Sergeant Rock. And I saw a lot of the what ifs and the fantasy stuff. I didn't know that comics, everybody knows Batman and Superman, because, when you're a kid, if you're not reading comics, you're seeing toys, you're watching movies, you're watching TV shows, and I had no idea that they were doing stories like Superman losing his powers and becoming, a superhero called Nova, but he didn't know how to punch because he didn't know how to fight without his powers. And these are really cool. And I started to take note of the artists that I liked, and started to remember certain names. My dad had saved books by Carmine Infantino, and I didn't know who that was. I didn't know he was important, but he had those books. The '89 Batman movie came out, and around that time is when my friend started to introduce me to comic book shops. So that's when I started collecting, and I kind of switched from comic strips to comic books, which is, it's funny because ironically, it's come full circle. My next book will be a comic strip book. So a few years ago, I put out a picture book. And then after that, with writer Travis Corwin, I put out a a short one shot called Finale, where I did some very different art for me, much more bright. And you look at the book, you look at Finale, and it to me it looks very European. Hey, Alan.
Hey, Philip. Sorry to join a little late. Good to meet you, and I'm excited to chat with you.
You interrupted me. God. So what was I saying? Finale looks very European, which is I think a little bit different for me. And so I've been wanting to do a couple of the graphic novels that I've written. But then I hear from my friend Keith Frady, who I met at Heroes a couple years ago, and he pitched to me this very surreal comic strip book idea. And so I get to draw comic strips again. So it's both intimidating and also very cool because I get to draw, in that sort of like comic strippy way. It's very cartoony, very pared down, very economical, which is not something I do a lot anymore. I like to draw big. So I've got lots of lines and lots of dry brushing. And, I taught myself how to paint a few years ago. So I started doing that. And now I'm back to the economy of line and economy of storytelling. So that book is supposed to come out this year.
Yeah.
It's going to be called it's called Good Grief: The End of Talking Back. And
okay.
Yeah, so I'm full circle with the comic strips.
And it's a pure comic strip. It's kind of like I guess how they collect the Garfield comic strips, and you just have a series of like strips within a book. It's kind of that format.
Kind of. So it's actually a conceptual book presented as a collection of strips from the cartoonist's last 5 weeks. What it is the creator of this comic strip suddenly disappears. And Keith's gonna have to forgive me because there's really no spoilers, because you're kind of the concept of the book is the pitch of the book. So there's nothing really to spoil. What you're really being treated to with this book is how the creator deals with tragedy. It shows up in the comic strip, and the strip goes from being an everyday funny thing to being this sort of dark, surreal, weird thing. And then the strip ends, and the collection of the book kind of speculates on what may have happened. It's kind of a love letter to both the creator and the strip. And on a wellness check, they also found some unpublished strips. So it's being presented in this collection. So it's kind of like a Calvin and Hobbes collection, where especially like the 10th anniversary and the revisitation book. I forget what it's called right now, but the revisitation book of Calvin and Hobbes came out a few years ago. So it's not every strip, but a lot of the strips are going to be annotated by the editor. Mm-hmm. And then there'll be a couple letters, kind of explaining what happened. And then you get into the behind the scenes of how those strips were published. The final strips are published, and then presented for the first time are the found strips. So it's going to go from the everyday, funnies to something incredibly surreal, which is like one of my several cups of teas. And it's going to be, I read, he pitched that to me. I was like, I have to be in.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. That's so.
Yeah. That's such a unique premise.
Yeah. It's
very
really
creative.
intriguing.
Yeah.
So in terms of the collaboration, you're working with a writer, and then you're doing the artwork for the concepts.
Yeah. So I met Keith at Heroes a couple years ago. What year is this now? So I think I met him in 2023, and I have a collection of his anthologies. He self-published some anthologies. Really good writer, and he's done some shorts for Man K as well. And I told him that I liked his writing. I knew he liked my art, and we kind of talked about how I grew up wanting to do comic strips, and that I discovered comic books and wanted to do comics. And so he somehow came up with this really cool idea of merging his penchant for very introspective, thought-provoking, and surreal storytelling with comic strips, and turned it into a conceptual piece. And it was so interesting sounding. I read the script, and it starts out, very sort of like, here's the jokes, here are the characters, here are the jokes. And it starts to sort of get a little bit zanier from there, as the creator goes through the tragedy he's about to go through. It's just I think it's special. It's going to be a very different sort of book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's because it's not going to be your typical comic book. It's also not going to be your typical strip collection, because it's fictional. Yeah. So it's completely conceptual, and the conceptual stuff is like right up my alley.
So your dad was a comic book collector, it sounds like.
He read comics. He saved a bunch of them.
Okay.
So I got to read sort of the transition between some of the goofy comics towards the comics where they started to be a little bit more serious again. So I saw some really goofy Batman books, and I saw some really, cool, serious Batman books. The real sad thing is, because he had like a big old box. I guess he's kept his comics in like these grocery bags, and they were in a box somewhere, and we got to read them. Unfortunately, I guess they got rain damaged, so all those books are just gone, which really sucks, because there's some really, really cool books in there. I remember getting to read those books was really cool, because back then I was a reader. You get into the comic book shop thing, and like I said, the '89 Batman book, the '89 Batman movie comes out from Tim Burton, and my friend was collecting comics, and this was around the time that I think it was Armageddon 2099, or it was that Armageddon crossover series from DC, and I forget what number was applied, but Armageddon 2000, something like that. And so I started collecting those, because oh, cool, comics can cross over. I didn't know that. And the art's really cool these days. Very, very different. And I started to take note of certain artists, like I did with comic strips. My favorite creators, Charles Schulz, and at the time Jim Davis, because I thought that Jim Davis was drawing everything. And then you start collecting comics, and not only was I discovering books that I liked and artists that I liked, but I started getting the collector mentality. So I polybagged everything, I boarded everything, and around the time I was collecting, there was the death of Superman. I can't remember if they killed off Jimmy Olsen and brought him back. Movie adaptations were the thing. So the Burton Batman movie comes out, and then there was a comic book adaptation of the movie adaptation of the comic book, which, you say it out loud, sounds really ridiculous. So I got into all that. But what I enjoyed about reading my dad's comics was that I was purely a reader. And all I did was I laid on the floor and I flipped through the comics like a kid. And I enjoyed nothing but just soaking in comics. I didn't worry about, keeping them safe. They were just books. The thing where Joe Quesada likes to say, he wants people to roll up comics and put them in their back pocket again. Yeah. It was kind of like that for me. But then, I was one of the guys that bought 3 copies of The Death of Superman, and I still have 2 copies in that bag. So if that bag got to that book, it's dust right now. I kind of want to open it to see how much that book is yellowed, but I also kind of want to see if I can sell those bagged books for dough.
So Philip, it sounds like we're around the same age. So how do you mind me asking? How old you are?
I'm 12. No, I'm 48. I turned 48 earlier this year.
Cool. Yeah, I'm 50, so like we're around the same age. And as fellow Gen Xers, um, I think, Alan, I want to get your thoughts. What's your knowledge of like the comic strip that people read in like newspapers and stuff like that? What's your exposure to that?
Well, I haven't read very much of those like in like the newspapers, but I've read a decent amount of Garfield comics and Pearls Before Swine, if you guys are familiar with that one.
Oh yeah.
Some Foxtrot as well.
Cool.
It was because when I was growing up, I would go to Borders every weekend with my family, and like they have like those collections of those comic strips like Garfield and Pearls Before Swine and all of those. So over the years, like I ended up buying like quite a few of those collections, and I enjoyed them. And actually, like when I was growing up, I didn't read like superhero comics very much. So like I guess in a way, like those comic strips are like my entry point to comics art as well.
So Philip, when you were, because it was back during our period when we were younger, the newspaper was like it's something you just opened and it was like your portal to what was going on in the world, like the physical newspaper. Yeah. And the strips, especially when we're younger, right? When we're younger, the strips are kind of like what we go to and we read. What were some of those strips for you growing up?
I basically read the comics page until there was no longer a newspaper in the house. So I remember comics like obviously Peanuts and Garfield. There was the Broomhilda comic, Kathy, Hagar the Horrible. Eventually there came, Calvin and Hobbes and Luann. There was there's the Wizard of Id. There's a Berkeley Breathed comic that Outland. I read as soon as I discovered comics, and I found out that there was a comic section in the newspaper. Just like any kid who discovers that, they're not going to read. Well, I didn't read the sports section. What are sports? What's sports ball? I don't understand. I went for the comic section, and that's what I read. And I wanted to be in that section of the newspaper. I didn't care about the rest of the paper. But I was also really fortunate to have grandparents that had, various types of books on their shelves. And at some point, I discovered, hey, my grandfather has this huge book called the Smithsonian Collection of Newspaper Strips. And I read that thing like it was a comic book, because it's got Crazy Cat. It's got Slumberman with Little Nemo. It's got the classic Popeye strips in there. It's got the classic Mickey Mouse stuff in there, where Mickey was actually like an adventurer.
Any Superman?
I think he may have had some Superman. It's got Prince Valiant in there and Mark Trail. All sorts of stuff. It's a beautiful. I have that book in my room. It's a beautiful book. It's huge. It's about as big. Those Marvel and DC character encyclopedias. I was gifted a couple of those, so I have like a couple DC encyclopedias and a couple Marvel encyclopedias. It is bigger than those things. Just like in terms of like, if you want to see Crazy Cat in all its glory, the book. I know it's the internet, it's streaming, but like, relative. It's like about this fat, if you can glean anything from video, and it's wide and tall, and it's got Little Abner, huge, and Crazy Cat, huge. It's a beautiful book.
Used to be when these things were like a mainstream thing. I mean, you say cartoonist, and you would immediately imagine the cartoonist is person who made comic strips on a newspaper. That was it, right? Now, yeah. What happened to that job position? well, what happened to that? Is there something else replaced that? Or is there those cartoonists? Do they have place to go?
I mean, yes. So folks that want to do comic strips specifically, are still around, and newspapers still publish comic strips. They're just not quite the same. So comic strips, the original comics, because they weren't comic strips as a strip, actually came a little bit, was the weekly thing. But you would have these grandiose, huge comics
Sunday, yeah.
that were in color, and they were meant to help sell newspapers. It's been a while since I've had to regurgitate this, so I might be a little off. But the newspaper strips, the classic newspaper strips that we know of, there's the black and white strips, but then those huge, glorious, colorful, well drawn, artistic comics in the newspapers, they were meant to help sell those papers, and eventually the newspapers didn't really need that help. The news became more important. The space dedicated to comics started to dwindle, which is why when Bill Watterson came out with Calvin and Hobbes, he started to fight back about with the Sundays. He wanted more freedom. He wanted to be allowed to not have his stuff cut up, and he was criticized for it, but also he was praised for it too, because he brought back a sense of freedom in the creation of the strip. It was no longer relegated to 3 rows of panels, and he was an exception. And several newspapers dropped his strip because he didn't want to conform to what they needed to do with the layout of their publication. And as comics start to have less and less space, and less notoriety in strips, in the newspapers, those strip artists eventually turned to the web. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had things like Girls with Slingshots from Daniel Corsetto. We had PvP from Scott Kurtz. We had Penny Arcade and Apple Geeks. And people started to go to the web. And I'm not somebody who enjoys reading digital comics. I like to have stuff in my hand. I don't want to do this to read my comics. I like to look at 2 pages that have been designed specifically to be viewed, and then I get to read, across on a well-designed page, flicking panel to panel to panel to panel. That's not for me. But strips were something that I got to read because I got bored at work, and there are a lot of really good strips online. I have Danielle Corsetto's hardback collection of Girls with Slingshots because I loved it so much. It's a phenomenal comic, and she's so good at what she does. There were a lot of strip artists that flocked to the web. I've been out of reading web-oriented comics for a while now, and now we have things like webtoons. But with the internet, you can publish kind of almost whatever it is that you want. If you want to publish just a static, strip, you can do that. If you want to experiment with scrolling, like Scott McCloud was doing and probably is still doing, with how comics are laid out as you scroll one way or across, you can do that. It's Scott McCloud's quote unquote infinite canvas. But for me, one of the reasons why I don't like reading digital comics isn't because I don't like the comics online. It has nothing to do with the comics themselves. I don't want to stare at a light bulb while I read, which is essentially what you're doing. The closest thing to me reading something digital that I actually enjoy is reading my paper white Kindle, because it's not a giant light bulb. It's backlit in a different way. Yeah. Me reading a comic on my phone or an iPad is just not enjoyable. I'm staring at a piece of light. So, and there's something very special about being able to hold a comic or any book in your hands, because it's there. Everything is disposable, but anything digital is much more easily disposable. It can go away at any time. It's easily lost. It's easily deletable. But having a book, even though it is also disposable, I can light it on fire, I could throw it in the trash, I could throw it out in the street and have a truck run over it. But there's something psychological about having a physical book in your hand because it makes it tangible. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I enjoy.
I don't think it will ever be. I mean, people are afraid. Oh, these these physical medium is gonna go away. I don't think it ever will go away because there are always gonna be people like us who love the physical medium. So,
absolutely. I currently had to go back to work for a bit, so I have returned to working in a print shop. And I was told many times, as I'm sure all of you have been told, print is dead. It's not. It's just changed.
Yeah.
Print is now more of a specialty item. And, to be honest, things are a little bit easier to read in print. If I have to proofread something, it can get real trying on my eyes reading the screen. It's easier to make notations and corrections on a computer, but it's there's a reason why physicality is important to people. When the iPhone came out, we were like, oh, digital calendars, that's going to be awesome. A lot of us found out right away that when you put something in a calendar, you forget about it. But if you write it down in a notebook, like bullet journaling, I keep a bullet journal calendar for a lot of things.
I have a daily journal too. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if you don't look at it, you've written it down. It helps with memory. And so tangibility is something that's, I think, extremely important. Print is not dead. It's just different. And it's much more of a specialty item now. Right. And people read, I read digital books. I read ebooks. I get stuff from an e-library. I really like the convenience of being able to check out an e-library book and, to be able to read it that way. And if I really like it, I'll buy a physical copy. And man, people who buy books, they love specialty. They love specialty books.
Yeah.
I was talking with a friend and client the other day about what they want to do with their next release, and people love like painted edges, and they love beautiful looking hardcovers, and I think that people still like putting stuff on their shelves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the physical books. I mean, with the act of writing yourself, whether you're going to just write a check mark or whatever, the act of doing that adds to your memory.
Yes.
Like you say, it's tangible memory. It's not the memory that could be just reset. These are digital data that just constantly, it goes by you too fast. So it's not going to remain with you. It's like a stream of water. It just go by.
Oh, absolutely. Though the internet, the internet was built to exchange information, and real quick, everything became fleeting content. There are some places like if you go to Substack is for people who want to actually sit there and read something, kind of like how blogs were a thing and Tumblr was a thing, and then Tumblr became a thing where like it was just like a big format social media you started to flick through. But people who read blogs or people who flock to Substack, people with longer attention spans, people who are sick and tired of the fleeting content will find it online, and they will find it in print. But yeah, social media and the internet is it just through the nature of how it's built encourages fleeting action. Right. Social media, there's been a lot of talk in recent years about how there's a lot of content online, not art. There is a lot of art online, but it's presented as content, and content is fleeting. It's something that is easily you can easily scroll through, and it's not fun, and it's not as memorable as you say.
You just like a newspaper. Have you ever go Oh, that's news. You read the headline, right? And
Yeah.
Okay. You want to go in further than that? No, you just go to the next one. So you never
Yeah.
read.
Yeah,
I'll read the first couple of paragraphs.
I'll read a headline if the headline sound and you know I hate clickbait, but if the headline sounds like something I should probably read, I'll probably read at least the first few paragraphs, and then if it's if it's interesting enough or if it's important enough, I'll try to read the rest of it. But one thing that we are not going to escape from is that people just like stuff. People like stuff. They like to have, they like to see stuff and hold stuff, and they for some reason they want stuff in their homes. We like stuff.
Yeah.
We will never stop buying stuff.
Never. At least not from a comic books perspective. So do you still have your old collection? It sounds like you kept a lot of the books, or do you have the entire collection, or
I have
them off or lose them?
Oh no, I have several. I think Nam's trying to get our attention.
I gotta go.
Wow.
I give you warning. I was gonna, I have to go.
Yeah,
but
thanks for joining, Hyung.
talking to you, Jin. Enjoyed the talk. Really appreciate that you make some time for us. Don't be so fleeting with us, okay? I try not to be myself. But
and this apparently is what abandonment feels like. You're leaving.
Have a good one.
All right, Hyung. Have a good night.
Great talking to you.
Uh-huh.
What were we talking about?
Your comic book collection.
I still have all my long boxes and a couple short boxes. But I stopped collecting monthlies a long time ago because I realized what I really like is I like to sit down and read a book, and monthlies have really changed as well. Just everything seems shorter and more ad written, and also as I've matured, because remember I'm still 12. As I've gotten older, I've realized how much I hate reading on glossy paper. I absolutely hate it. I know that not everybody shares my distaste for reading on glossy, but I am sitting here on the couch. I'm trying to read, Sandman Overture. I have the hardback version. The art is crazy. It's a new, at the time it was a new Sandman story. I'm trying to read it, and I'm just like, okay, I can't read this because of the glare. I can't read this because of the glare.
Yeah.
And but also I think I'm an artist, and I'm a traditional artist, and I create on newsprint over everything. You know what? I'm with that sentiment because newsprint is awesome. I love the way things look on newsprint, and I love the way that old comics look on newsprint, and actually new newsprint looks really good too.
You need to go back to papyrus.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of specialty paper these days, but for books, I found that as a traditional artist, because I work on paper, and I use mostly water-based paints. So watercolors, gouache, and acrylics are all water-based paints, with the exception of acrylics, which have that plastic look to it, which you have to mitigate if you want that matte look, which is what I like. You have to mitigate that with medium. So I'm painting and drawing on paper, bristle board and cold press watercolor paper, and my stuff just looks better on uncoated or matte paper, depending on the printing method. And I don't like my stuff on glossy paper. That's just a personal thing for my work. And so when I read comics, I want to see everything on uncoated or matte paper as well, because I like the look of it. One thing that is kind of difficult to one thing I think is kind of difficult to get around for me is that a lot of modern mainstream comics, they just look overproduced. When you fall in love with like a rock band, doesn't matter what era, And their first album is like maybe a little bit more raw, a little bit more garage like, and then as they become more and more refined, they tighten up, but they still have that vibe. And then all of a sudden they get a producer and it sounds a little too clean and a little too nice and a little too pristine. And it's kind of like that for a lot of mainstream comics. I have obsessive compulsive tendencies, so I know what it's like to want things to be perfect. And also I spent a lot of years, I marched drum corps, and I taught marching percussion, so I'm all about cleanliness and perfection, precision. But when it comes to illustration and when it comes to fine art, I want to see a little bit more rawness. And I think the look of a lot of comics in the mainstream, not all, there's something about it that looks extremely overproduced, if I wanted to make the music analogy. Okay. And there are a lot of modern comics that I enjoy, a lot of, but I gravitated more towards the indie space.
Indie stuff.
It's really important, by the way, because we sound, back in my day, newsprint was the shit. It's important as a creative person, as an artist, to not let go of your youthfulness. I like to joke around by, when people ask me my age, I always say 25, because I know I don't look my age. And I also like to say that I'm 12 because, boob farts, boobies, I can be really mature, but I'm also an adult. I'm a 40-year-old man. And, so I've seen a lot of stuff, not everything, and I've heard a lot of stuff. And I'm also an artist. It would be really easy as a person who gets older to go like, well, it was way better back in the day. That's a really dumb way to look at anything. Miles Davis proved that you can get older and older and older and older, and absolutely, still be with it. You can put out some really bomb music just by, falling in love with and incorporating something new that's going on. He's surrounded himself with new artists all the time, and he incorporated new sounds all the time. And I try to do the same, but I try to incorporate anything that's new into the methods that I like to use, which is I'm a traditional artist. That's my thing. And when I look at modern comics, I know that we're using modern printing technology, and we're using digital coloring, and we're using digital lettering. And I think there's a way to incorporate a lot of new methods without having it look like it needs to be, a $5 billion budgeted, special effects laden, over refined movie. I like comics because they're hand drawn, and I dig that look. You can use all the current tech and methods you want, but I just like to see something that is like very clearly hand drawn. It's not a new thing, but when you create a font for lettering, I learned how to letter. And by the way, when we talk about lettering, I'm not just talking about writing the words onto a page. Learning how to letter means proper placement, where to place balloons so that it guides you through the page, so that it guides you through the artwork.
Yeah.
And also you can tell who's talking, and it's not obstructive. It's not just like, oh, here's space, put the lettering here. That's not how you letter.
Yeah,
I learned how to do that.
An OCD exercise. I feel like you're like, that seems like something up your alley a little bit. The lettering.
Oh yeah. So I have a few lettering clients, and my job, because the artist will either leave space or no space, or they'll put like dummy balloons in. My job is to help the reader navigate through the page so that they see the artwork in an order that it's supposed to be seen in, while reading the dialogue and the text that it's supposed to be in, so that they get from one point of the page next to the last point of the page, and it all makes sense. So I learned how to do that by hand lettering. Wow. I still have an Ames guide. I still use an Ames guide, and I will still hand letter, but there is no way that I want to hand letter a 196-page graphic novel, which is something that I've written on accident because I just kept writing and writing and writing. So, it's not a new thing, but I created a font out of my own handwriting, and I've incorporated, the modern technology of digital lettering because I'm very good at Adobe Illustrator, which is my app of choice for lettering, and traditional methods. I hand draw all my balloons. I'll use like Clip Studio to lay out stuff sometimes, and I'll digitally letter dummy balloons so that I can figure out where everything needs to go. And then when I go to actually draw on board, I've got exactly where my lettering needs to go, and I can place my artwork around that. And then I hand draw the balloons, I scan everything, and then I can digitally letter. And that makes it really easy for my clients. It's all digital lettering, but I try to make the balloons look organic instead of like, oh, clearly he used, it's, templatized. I want to make sure that the look of the lettering and the look of the balloons match the artwork. So maybe some things look more organic depending on the artwork, and some things look a little bit more rigid depending on the artwork. So, when we talk about modern comics, we should use all the technology that we can to make these comics. But in the end, what I want to see is I don't want to see something that's too overproduced. Comics are kind of like that sort of like grassroots DIY punk rock medium. I want comics to be taken seriously, just like any comics guy, and I want comics to be able to go from mainstream superheroes to that that indie biopic that's just going to bring you to tears. There's room for all of it, and I want comics to be taken seriously. It's both entertainment and literature, but there's also something that's very special about looking at a comic in of any genre, and just seeing that somebody drew it. I like that feeling.
Phillip, I do want to get to some of your work here. I have your books and comics page up here from your website. Is there any specific book here that you want to talk about?
Not especially. If you have questions about any of those, I'd be happy to answer questions.
I guess
those are all the books. By the way, the books on my site are all the books that I either wrote and drew or did the art for. Well, some of the other books that I was involved in, I Pimp Killer's not there because I did the lettering and I did the cover, and then some books I just haven't updated. I recently did interior illustrations for a novella by Brian Patrick Fagan called The LARPer's Last Stand. It's about a group of LARPers that go to a weekend game on some island, and while gaming, somebody lets loose, the devil basically, and an evil mage from way back when, and it turns into a horrific slaughterhouse. So that's not on there, but I'd be happy to talk about any of the ones that are actually on there.
Do you like because it seems like in the few works you've talked about and the projects you've done, it seems like you like things with sort of a darker spin on storytelling. So can you? I have Stalker Snatch up here. Feel free to kind of elaborate on what this book and this project is, and
sure,
kind of where you land as an artist in terms of the kinds of stories you want to tell.
So it's funny because I'll go to cons and I get a lot of people who really like dark stuff and horror stuff, and they think that they want to know if I'm a horror artist, or they think I'm a horror artist, and I'm like, that was not my intention. I love ink, and so I use a lot of black, and then I'm like, but I can do colorful, cute stuff too. There's James and the Giant Peach right behind me, but I do have a lot of darker art up. I think it's just kind of a natural thing for me, not just because of the ink, but I think because I think I like a lot of darker themes because it's like for me, it's kind of like a self-examination in a way. And so the Stalker Snatch, before COVID hit, I had written this poem that was very, very different than what's actually presented in the Stalker Snatch. It's a little harder to read, but I knew that I wanted to do a picture book that was meant for kids and teens and adults, and for parents that read to their kids. So I thought it'd be fun to do an all ages horror story. So my pitch for that is it's an all ages horror story done in the spirit of Evergory, Roald Dahl, Nightmare Before Christmas, Coraline. It's designed so that anybody can read it, and especially so that parents can read it to their kids without getting bored or rolling their eyes. It's a morality tale, and it's about the perils of becoming the things we hate. And it took me a couple years to finish it because I had to refine the writing. And then I finally got around to just, sketching out all the pages so that I could, I could design the book, where I wanted to place the text, how I wanted the book to look. And when COVID hit and we all stayed home, I was like, I'm just gonna get this done. So I mocked up the dummy. I had a consultation with a former art director for Penguin, just to get a second professional eye on it. Made some changes from there, and I started to draw the pages. And I found that just because I'm at home, just because we're all forced to stay home, doesn't mean I need to burn myself out, because that's exactly what I did. So I took a break, and then in the year that I finished it on New Year's Eve, because I did not allow myself to watch any movies, and I did not allow myself to order any pizza or any food for that night until I finished the last spread. And luckily I finished in time to order pizza because I was really hungry.
So you're starving yourself to get it done. Huh?
Yeah, I just really wanted to get it done. I don't like to have...
Sometimes you need that deadline for that final burst of motivation.
Yeah. I needed to motivate myself to get it done.
As a perfectionist, do you find that difficult to do? Like always, kind of, oh, let's make an adjustment here, adjustment there, and you just never get around to finishing it. Do you run into that issue quite often?
The problem with being a perfectionist is that nothing is perfect.
Right.
I was the guy who would go and I would go buy DVDs, and I'd get it home, and I'd open it up and see like there's this like the tiniest little streak on on the reader side. It was nothing, it's just how it was just how DVDs came out of manufacturing at the time. And then I got it, I started working for Tower Records and Video in 1999 and all the way through 2006. I moved to the website in late 2000. So I worked there for I guess that's 7 years. And that was even worse because I could order stuff from the warehouse and I'd look at it and I'd open it up. I got the Lord of the Rings box sets, and there's a streak here, there's a streak here. I'd send those discs back, get a whole new set, replace the discs, and then send that back. And I would do this, and I was at a family thing one day, and my dad goes, "I don't know why you do that. Nothing's ever perfect." And I don't know why I decided to finally take that notion seriously, but the problem with being a perfectionist is that nothing's ever perfect. And so one of the traps that I can fall into very easily with my work, because I'm a very analytical person. My brain is usually on unless I'm asleep. And so I can look at my work and, sometimes I'll be like, okay, this came out really good. And a lot of times I will wonder why I did this at all. So the thing about finishing something is to get it done. And I hate to say the phrase to the best of your ability, because when I was teaching percussion, one of the things that I would teach my students is I don't want your best. What I want is better than your best, because what if your best sucks that day? And that's kind of a competitive way to look at things, because it was drumline. When you win a competition, that doesn't necessarily mean you deserved to win. It just so happened that you won that day. And if you lost that day, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a loser. It means that it means that somebody else just happened to win. You may have deserved to have won that day, or maybe you didn't. Anything can really happen, and that the same thing goes with creating your stuff. If I'm working on that last spread, because it's 2022, it's New Year's Eve. I've got one more spread to go before I can, order my New Year's Eve treats and watch movies all night. If by the time I was done, I can look at it and go, yeah, I can live with that, then it's done. If I really, really hate something, then yeah, I will start something over. Usually I'll know whether or not something can be saved during the process of, doing the thing. My rule for stopping is if I'm doing a thing and I'm drawing and I'm close to being done, and there's going to be a point where my brain goes, and I will say out loud, stop, or you're going to F it up. And so I stop. And then I try to give myself a little bit of time, and I'll go back and I'll look at it, say the next day. And if there's something that needs to be fixed, I'll fix it. If it's super horrible and I know I can't put it out in the world, which sometimes I put it out anyway, then I'll either try to salvage it, or I'll just start it over, or I'll abandon it. But for the Stalker Snatch, because it was a book that I knew I wanted to release by my birthday of the next year, I wanted to get it done. Everything was by that time I'd been drawing the book for a little while, so I was kind of in a flow. So I didn't really have to start any of those spreads over. Maybe one page I redrew a couple times, but for the most part, whatever came out, as long as I could live with it, I just kept it.
Did you get any feedback? Because it looked like you're targeting, like young children. Did you get any feedback from, I don't know, kids from of your friends, or?
I haven't gotten any feedback from kids.
Okay.
I've gotten feedback from people with kids. I've gotten feedback from adults.
Yeah.
And they really like it. I've had school teachers come up and I tell them what the book is about, and they flip through it and they really love it. And they're an elementary school teacher and they end up buying it. So that's very rewarding. I've had friends who, they're not going to BS me. I have, when you make friends with people who aren't going to BS you. And, I've had friends who are artists and or writers, and they have said good things about the book.
Yeah. It looks beautiful. I mean, the art is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
It's just, I'm just worried it's going to scare the kids too much, but I always were very intentional in not making anything violent or anything. It was just like a lot of like creatures and like dark spaces, but yeah, it looks fantastic.
I always encourage whoever's at my table to flip through it if they're parents and they like the idea, because there are a lot of parents that like, dark stuff, and their kids like dark stuff, but I always encourage them to look through it. And I always tell them there's nothing gory or really violent in it. There are just darker images, and it's about a group of kids that prevail over monsters. They win the day like you would expect them to. I remember, I don't remember the details, but I remember that there was a story on NPR years ago about how kids actually handle fear pretty well when it comes to entertainment and fiction. And I think that was a general thing. But when you're watching Lord of the Rings and Gollum comes on, they might go, but it's not really scarring.
Yeah.
But of course, I think it depends on what the imagery and what the content is. I made sure that if I was going to pitch the book as an all ages horror story, that it was truly for all ages.
Mm-hmm.
If you like weird poetry, that's kind of written in a weird way, because I did not use any sort of typical stanza format. If you like darker art, if you like The Night Before Christmas, if you like Coraline, if you like Roald Dahl stuff, I think that you would like The Stalker Snatch. And I like to float Edward Gorey's name in that pitch too, because there are a lot of people that still love his stuff. I don't know if you can get away with the Gashly Tinnies anymore. You know what that is, that the alphabet where kids are murdered in various ways. I don't know if you can get away with that anymore, but it's still around, and I love that stuff. But I wanted to make it all ages, so it's definitely something where when parents come by, I have them look through the book. I let them know there's nothing gory in it. It's just a bunch of dark stuff, and I think that it would be a lot of fun to read to your kid or have your kid look through.
So what is it? What is the thing for you that you hate that you?
Oh man. I think The Stalker Snatch was kind of written in response to how we treat each other online. A lot of people profess to be a good person, or they I'm a nice guy, really. I don't all I want is, you can get various people who seem to be incredibly aggro online, and they all tout to be, they all profess to be, I'm a good American, or I'm a good person. I'm a nice guy, really, in life. Some people don't profess to be anything. They just act online without thinking. And I think that the way that I see us treat each other online is it's terrible. But I have to wonder how many of those people who are writing stupid stuff online are, hanging out with their friends, having a drink, or watching a movie, or having dinner, if they say the same kind of stuff and they treat their friends like crap. This is a very broad, overreaching general statement, of course. But my observations of what people say to each other online, it's just, it's not thoughtful and not helpful. And I do wonder if this is what people say in real life, or if it's just what they think they can get away with online.
Yeah.
If we want to be good people and we're doing this to each other online, we're actually just becoming the thing that we, would. Okay. So basically, would you want to be treated this way because you're treating other people this way? So if you don't want to be treated that way, but you're treating other people this way, you're just becoming the thing that you say that you don't want to be.
Right. So
I think The Stalker Snatch was largely in response to that, because we were, especially during COVID, we were living our life online.
Yeah.
And then with the political climate during that time,
people were being very, again, the political climate wasn't helping, but it was kind of like, you had to draw a line in the sand, and either you stand with us or you stand on that side, and it was just very divisive. So
yeah. And the problem with that is again, another blanket statement. Gray area is not taken into account by the general public. Again, general statement, blanket statement. I hate zealots. Zealousness is extremely dangerous. I don't care if you're liberal, conservative. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. When you are an extremist of any kind, it's dangerous, because you don't allow for the things that don't fit into your extreme. There's a whole world in between.
Mm-hmm.
And all you really need to do is listen. I don't care. Henry Rollins, I love Henry Rollins' spoken word stuff, and he once said, if you're on a show and a white supremacist is on there, would you want to listen to him? He says, absolutely. Hear what he has to say, and if anything, know your enemy. So let those guys talk, let them be heard, and maybe you'll reach an understanding of why this guy is the way that he is. And if that guy's also willing to listen, that's when conversations start. So unfortunately, not everyone's willing to listen. So that's big problem number one. One of the reasons why we are in the in a repeat of a crappy political climate right now is because people just refuse to listen, and the people who didn't think they were being heard decided to vote for somebody who they think is listening to them when he's actually not. Mm-hmm. When Trump won the first time, it's because all those people in the states were when Trump won the first time, and I really don't want to get political right now, but we're going to be talking about listening. When Trump won the first time, it was because people who felt they were unheard felt that they were listened to by idiot. But the people, the person who should have been listening to them was the people that actually won the popular vote.
Right.
But just because, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote doesn't mean that, I can't believe I'm getting political online. I've tried to avoid this for years. But just because she won the popular vote doesn't mean that the people who felt like they weren't being listened to didn't have a huge swing. That's why we're in the political climate we are in now. I'm going to stop with actual politics and go back to the original subject, which is that if people would just listen more, we probably, doesn't matter how divisive we are, probably get along a whole lot better. So when I wrote the Stalker Snatch, it was kind of in response to the fact that, we treat each other like shit online. We treat each other and we expect to be listened to, but I don't think a lot of people are reciprocating. If you want to be listened to, you should also be listening.
Right.
And so Stalker Snatch is about that, partially about that. But, I also like to do I don't like to do the thing where, like, some people ask me what my art's about. Like, they'll ask me, I have a drawing of a crow that's tied up. And people always ask me, why did you tie the crow? Or what does this mean? And I was very reluctant at first to explain that. And I when people look at my stuff and they see a thing, I want them to be able to see that, even if it's not the thing that I see. But people are also very interested in what I intended with the piece. And so I've just started to learn that people aren't going to lose their interpretation of something because they already have that interpretation. If I tell them what my intention was behind a thing, it either adds to it or it's just separate from what they think. And so the Stalker Snatch is that way. I wrote it in response to a thing, but whatever anybody else gets out of it is a good thing.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, I mean, again, please go check out Phillip's website. The last question I want to kind of ask you, and I guess we'll close out on this question is, we're celebrating AAPI Heritage Month, and we haven't really had an opportunity to talk about your heritage, your background, but you did talk about your father, and we got Mother's Day coming up. So
just kidding.
Talk about, your culture, what you grew up with, and how you identify with the Asian American community.
I'm Chinese. My dad was the first one in his family to be born here. So on my dad's side, I guess that makes me second gen, and I think on my mom's side, I'm fourth. So I was born here. I was kind of brought up slightly Americanized, but also we did practice certain things.
Did you grow up in like the Bay Area?
No, I grew up in Sacramento.
Sacramento.
Yeah, I didn't move to the Bay Area till late 2018.
Okay.
Cool. So, I did not grow up speaking the language. I wasn't. My dad would speak Taiwanese to me as a baby, but I wasn't responding, so I think he just stopped. So I think as I've gotten older and much more aware of who I am, and I've always been a very self-aware person, but you get older and you become more and more self-aware, right? And I have wanted to explore the culture behind my heritage more and more. So as I've gotten to be a more experienced artist, I've started incorporating more and more Chinese, if not East Asian, if not Asian stuff into my work. I've said before on various streams that just because you can't see the Chinese or Asian influence in my work doesn't mean it's not there. So, for example, I have a few pieces that are very clearly inspired by something Asian, and then I have other pieces where all I'm really doing is I'm using a Chinese brush. You just don't know it. And I started using Chinese brushes. Not only I started experimenting with it because I thought it'd be really cool to use a Chinese tool.
Yeah.
But also like those brushes on a technical level, that's stuff that I can do stuff with that brush that I don't seem to be able to, or have a hard time doing with like a Western sable brush,
right?
Because they're cut differently, they react differently, they produce lines differently.
Do you find yourself, because I know I'm harking back to your own self-critique on what you create, but do you find when you're working with something as organic as like an ink brush that you like the results better, or is it more like maddening, like, oh, that stroke, it doesn't look right? Like where's the balance you find there?
I've been inking since I can't remember. I've been inking forever. So I got started inking because I wanted to do comic strips. If you so, like, I knew that I would have to ink my own stuff and wanted to draw my own comic strips. And then I discovered comic books, and I started reading comics. I was like, there's a penciler and an inker? That's crazy. Why would I let anybody else ink my own stuff? So I wanted to teach myself how to ink. And I started off, my dad gave me some speedball nibs and whatever ink he had lying around. I still have an old Pelican bottle, and dip pens are kind of when you're new, they can be real difficult to use. And there was a guy at the comic shop that I was going to. He was starting to do some work for Marvel, and I asked him, "Hey, is there like some sort of easier way to ink? Because like indie ink is like supposed to be the comic book artist's ink, but like, is there any way to like feed that through a pen or something?" I didn't know anything about fountain pens or anything. And Pentel at the time was putting out this weird marker with a sort of like rubber nib. And I started using that, and it was okay at first. And I realized I wasn't getting the lines that, my favorite comic book artists were using. And Wizard Magazine has started to come out, and like, oh, Todd McFarlane uses a Hunts 102 crow quill. So I started using that, and I taught myself how to use a nib. And eventually, years later, I finally picked up a sable brush, and I started to experiment with that. And then I discovered a Maru pen, which is a Maru nib, which is the equivalent of a Hunts 102 crow quill, but way better. And I discovered G pens, and I was using that for a while. And eventually I went back to Maru nibs because G pens are just too fat for me. And then I discovered, facsimiles of Eastern brushes. And I was like, I don't like these. But then I discovered really well-made Chinese brushes. And so over the years, I've experimented with different inking tools and different brushes. And what you're really doing is when you're using these tools is you're learning control with difficult tools. Yuko Shimizu teaches at the Arts College in New York. And one of her rules is, at least in her class, no markers. You're gonna learn how to use traditional tools, and it's not because they're better. It's because if you're using tools that are harder to control, when you go to use the tools that you want to use, whether it's a continuation of dipping implements, or you want to use markers, or you want to use a ballpoint pen, you have gained a type of control that you would not have had otherwise. And I do agree with that. Again, I used to teach drums, and so we would teach certain things that we would get to a point where things were really difficult, so that when we backed off, the easy stuff seemed even easier. So I agree with that philosophy. And so, but I've also never shied away from those traditional tools because I just really like them. They're extremely versatile. I use markers for certain things, and I'm really big about using when I create artwork. I'm really big about using archival stuff, even if it's like, inexpensive, low-level archival stuff. I'll still use it. So I like Faber-Castell's pip pens because they use India ink. So I'll use those to line certain things or to letter certain things. But for the most part, I still use dip pens and brushes because, for example, I love sketching with a Pentel pocket brush, but that brush tip is not the same. I actually find I can do certain things with it, but it's just not the same as taking a Chinese brush, dipping it into some ink, and doing the things that I can do with it.
Well, the brush is not. The brush is meant to both communicate writing and art, right? Like it's like you're doing two things at once, which is a little. I mean, it's kind of the same in terms of comics or imagery, I guess. I guess it's one and the same, but it's really the art form is really just writing, right? You're writing the same type of character. The strokes don't change in terms of the writing, right? You can take there's a little variance there, but it's you're learning strokes with a brush. Do you find that when you're using this, you're connecting with your Chinese heritage, or is it something that you given all your different things, it's just another technique you wanted to learn?
I am horrible at calligraphy, but I can use it for drawing for sure. I think that when I use it, I don't really think about it much anymore because it's become part of me as an artist. I'm happy to include something Chinese behind what I do because I want to incorporate more Chinese and Asian stuff in my work. And so being able to use that, and I'm not Japanese, but being able to use a Japanese nib, I like that idea. It's a personal thing. It doesn't mean it doesn't and shouldn't really mean anything to anyone else, but being able to use those tools and being able to say, this brush comes from thousands and thousands of years of calligraphy tradition and brush making, and to be able to use it now in 2025 to produce work, it's. I would say at this point, it's very comforting. It's like a tattoo. You get your tattoo, and you're like, it's so cool. I've got tattoos right now, and then it just becomes a part of who you are. And you look down at your arm every once in a while, like, oh, that tattoo's there. Yeah, it's nice being able to use these tools is more comforting at this point than anything, and it allows me to, when I get questions about what tools I use, I can say I use a Chinese brush because of for these reasons.
Mhm.
These Chinese brushes are really good at producing these things once you learn how to control it. Very different from a Western brush. And so these things that I can do with a Chinese brush has become a part of me as an artist.
Mhm.
And so that's been really nice.
Going back to your results, when you see the results, are because you say you're using them now, you're incorporating them into your works now more and more. What's your sense aesthetically with how the result? Because it's like it's not as precise, right? We're talking about precision line. You've done the whole inking exercise, right? It's an exercise in like precision, but with the brush pen, it's almost like you don't know what you're going to get until you finish that final stroke. Uh, how did you balance that transition?
The more you use a thing, the more easy it is to predict the outcome. So you through muscle memory and through practice, you start to know, like, if I'm going to do this is the kind of line I'm going to produce. If I push down really hard, it's going to fly in. But it is largely unpredictable, which is something that I actually really like about traditional media. Of all the things that I can say about the differences between digital and traditional media is that there's a physicality that you do not get from digital art. When you change brushes in Photoshop, when you change brushes in Clip Studio, there is no change in physical feedback. You are still drawing on your tablet or your iPad, and you're still using the stylus. Everything feels the same, and pressure sensitivity, you get used to how that reacts based off of what you're seeing. If I push down hard, I see that the digital brush gets fatter. If I do really lightly, it looks smaller. But with physical media, a nib or a brush will react differently with different inks, with paints, and depending on what paper you're using. So I could use Stonehenge Aqua cold press, which is really, really soft paper. And if I use a nib on that, it's going to be way different than if I use a nib on 2-ply Series 500 Strathmore bristle board, which is different than 300-pound cold press arches, which is different than 140-pound rough Fabriano. And it's the same nib, or it's a different brush, or the feedback is going to be different. And I enjoy that physicality. And so that's what makes physical media unpredictable. But the more you do stuff, it becomes easier to predict what is probably going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how many times you practice a jump shot, are you going to make it in that basket every single time? No, because if you're doing this and you do this and you're shooting, if you are off just a little bit in this motion, or if muscle twinges, or if you have the wrong footing, anything can happen, because sports extremely physical. There's so many variables that can happen just physically, and that's what happens with physical media, and that's actually kind of what makes it fun.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Alan, anything else you want to add?
Well, I mean, just on that last bit, like I'm thinking it's like the difference between shooting the free throw, like, in person, or like in a video game, right? Because like if you're doing in a video game, like a lot of those variables are gone. So if you get good at it, then you can probably actually just make the shot every time, right? And it's interesting that part of the metaphor still translates when you're talking about sports rather than art. I think like everything else, like, I mean, the conversation keeps flowing, so I'm not going to comment on stuff like 15 minutes ago, but that last bit is just what I was thinking.
No, go for it. I do that. I do that. Hey, 10 minutes ago you said something. I want to revisit that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, I mean, let me reach back a little bit then. I mean, everything you said about like connecting, with like the Chinese Asian part of your heritage, that definitely resonated with me. Especially what you said about that influence coming through in everything you do, and not just in like the obvious, ways that people can see. It's pretty similar to I fill out various applications for like writing programs and stuff like that. And one of the common questions, especially if it's like a diversity program or like an Asian program, there's going to be a question like, okay, like how does your like heritage like come through like in your work or whatever. And sometimes that's an annoying question to deal with. But
I agree.
like, but how I started answering it is like I'll say there's a time when I was growing up, and like I thought like, I don't want to just write about Asian or Chinese stuff, because at that time, like to me, like writing about Asian Chinese stuff or like having a Chinese influence on your writing meant that you were writing like the Joy Luck Club or something like that, where you're like literally writing about like the taste and texture of like Chinese food. And I thought like, well, like I might be Chinese, but like I don't want to be writing about like Chinese food and Chinese restaurants all the time. So that's why I kind of rejected that a bit. But then like as I got older, I started to feel that like actually like because I am just a Chinese person, like even though like I grew up in America too, like I have a lot of Western influence and just in who I am. There's so much of me that is just like it is kind of locked into like a Chinese worldview in a certain way, just because that's the influence that I got from my parents, right? And so like everything that I write, everything that I do, it is kind of like shaped by that worldview, even in ways that like I'm not aware of myself. Like just one example that I realize is that I feel like Chinese stories like emphasize like stoicism a lot, it's just like, I mean, like there's some of that in like every culture, of course, but like there's something that feels very Chinese about like, especially like the stoic like dad character who's like, I don't know, like keeping secrets from everyone, or he's like taking on like all the burdens of to not worry everyone else. I feel like there's aspects of that, like, or like themes like that like came up in my writing, and and that's what made me realize like, even if I'm not writing the Joy Luck Club or whatever, like these are like the parts of like my interests and just like what I like to think about and write about, that like that is the expression of like my heritage, I suppose. And so that's what I was thinking about when you said, like it comes through in everything you do, like even if it's not like always the most, in the most obvious way.
So it's really important that you touch on that, I think, because that's called voice. So when people talk to me about style, I always try to divert the conversation. And I'll try not to rant on about this because I could go on and on. But when people talk about style, I have to remind them that style is just the result. Style is just the thing that you see at the end. What an artist really should be thinking about is their voice, and you don't really want to think that hard about it, because as you continue to write and you saw that you were thinking about certain things and certain things started to come out in your writing, that's just who you are. Everything that you do in life, both consciously and unconsciously, contribute to your voice, and that voice injects itself into your work, and then you can make the decision about what style you want to write in or draw in. So for example, the way you hold a pencil, the way you hold a pen, what you think about sports, the food you like to eat, the conversation you had with your girlfriend the other day, the conversation you had with your boyfriend the other day, the kind of clothes you like to wear. These are all things that at some point maybe thought about consciously, or maybe you just gravitated towards. I wear all black. I like to wear all black. I choose to wear all black. I'm uncomfortable in, white. Not that I haven't worn white, but I feel great in black. Those are decisions, right? Everything that I do in life kind of informs my voice. And so now I want to write a thing, or I want to draw a thing, and I sit down to do it. But I know that for my upcoming book, I'm going to have to draw in to make it look like, a comic strip. But Finale looks much more European, but the Stalker Snatch looks like a kid's horror book. But then the short stories that I have, I don't wear love goggles. I don't wear love goggles. Looks a whole lot different than the short story Y, which has just a bunch of like scribbly, two-dimensional characters. These are all stylistic choices. The results are different, but I'm thinking that because I draw circles a certain way, because I view faces a certain way, because I think of color in a certain way, because I like to write in a certain way, and I like to tell stories visually a certain way, that no matter what style I'm in, my voice is there to a point where, like, just because I drew Finale, the Stalker Snatch, I don't wear love goggles, stylistically they're different, but hopefully it looks like they all came from me. And when you're writing, and these things that come out of you come from a Chinese place, how you think about your parents, how you think about your uncles and your aunts, what you think about how if you're writing a story and like someone's at a diner, and somehow in your writing, this person at a diner thoughts of like the last time you were in and eating comfort food, but that comfort food wasn't a chicken salad, it wasn't a burger, it wasn't a patty melt, it was some joke. But the feelings that you had, eating some homemade joke or your grandma's joke, kind of creeps into how this person is feeling just eating his first burger in a year because he's done being a vegetarian. That's a voice to me. And now you can write that humorously. You can write that seriously. You can write that casually. You can write that poetically. You can write it as an action scene. But the way that you like to use vocabulary, the way that you like to construct sentences, the way that you like to put paragraphs together to form a page, to form the next page, to do a page turn, that, hopefully no matter what style you write in, somehow, some way, it's a little harder, I think, with the written word, because I think that style is a little bit more abstract because people are focused so much on the words and being able to understand them. But regardless of that, hopefully your voice is coming through and like, it's different for you, but I could see you writing this. That's called voice. It's not called style. Style is the result. Style is the thing that you choose. But all that stuff about you being Chinese, about your family members and stuff, that's part of your voice. And
this is what I really love about seeing like the entire body of work from an artist or a writer, or specifically when you see the second thing from someone, I think is very interesting. I have a bit more experience with it, like from reading other writers than with artists much. But when you see one piece of artwork or a story from someone, it actually doesn't necessarily tell you a lot about them, right? Because like you said, like there's so much like specific style that gets adapted to like each like individual piece of work, right? So that when you just have that one data point, you don't know like what's coming from the person and like what's coming like from the story as much, right? But I think it's so fascinating when like I read like a lot of like other screenwriters' work, and like when you see that second screenplay and you start to see like the common threads, like even across like very different stories or different genres, I think that's what shows you like kind of like the overlap there is like what lets you start piecing together like what this person is like really interested in at their core, or like what their voice starts to come through. And I just think that's like a very fascinating part of getting to know someone as you consume more of their creative output.
And I think you're open to that too, because you write, and so you're probably a little bit more observant about it. People, I think, generally, I'm going to make another blanket statement. I think people generally like to categorize stuff. So you put something out, and oh, that's your thing. And so when you do something different, they're like, I don't know, that's not your thing. Well, what makes it not my thing? People look at my my work and they're like, wow, you do a lot of different stuff. Yes, I do, but they, they can kind of acknowledge, they should be acknowledging, and they do, that it's my stuff. Like, they just see that I do a lot of different stuff, but they can tell that it's all my stuff. And I had a guy come up to me at a con. He was a friend of, I think it was it here? I think it was Heroes. I think it was Heroes last year. A friend of a friend came up to me, and we were talking about some of my stuff, and he noticed that I did a bunch of different stuff, and he goes, "Don't you find that to be challenging? Like, how do you market yourself if, like, you don't stick to a look or a genre?"
Wow.
My answer was, I don't care.
Yeah.
And he goes, but don't you want followers, and don't you want like fans? I'm like, people like my work. The first thing I need to do as a creator is be happy with what I create, or satisfied. I want to be able to be satisfied with the thing that I create, and I want to be able to do the thing that I do. And no matter what I put out, it's going to be mine. I'm not. There's a difference between choosing a genre style because you want to work in that genre, and trying to mimic the look of another artist because they work in that genre.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if you are doing anime fan art and you're mimicking a studio, you're mimicking a very particular thing. But if you want to do anime fan art and you use a lot of the visual techniques that are very prevalent in Japanese cartooning, you can take those techniques and you could take those aesthetics and make it your own. And I know plenty of artists who do that too.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the difference. And so when I answered this guy, my answer was, I don't care. And he thought, oh, don't you have trouble marketing yourself that way? I said, if I put out one thing and it looks one way, and I put out another thing and it looks another way, and people don't like that other thing, they don't have to buy it. They don't have to consume it. They don't have to read it. They don't have to look at it. And then if I put out a third thing and they happen to like that, then they can do that. People who look at my stuff, they like my body of work, or they like, or they like one thing and not another thing. So they'll buy that one thing, but they don't like this thing.
Yeah.
When I offer stuff to the public and they want to, I'm very grateful to anyone who buys my stuff. If you don't buy this thing and you prefer another thing, well, that's because you like this thing. That's all I care about.
I think, you as a creator, it really is about, because we all have our own personal journey, and not all of us are creators, right? But as an individual, as a human being, as a part of your immediate surroundings environment and part of the larger global, if you think on a global scale, right? But you evolve as an individual, right? You learn things, you pick up things, you get better at certain things, you discard certain habits or certain things you had maybe as a younger person. But in Asian culture, we call that wisdom. At the end of the day, it's because you've earned all this experience and years, and what you've molded as a person at the end of life is hopefully something. It's something that your life journey was worthwhile, right? And that there's some meaning behind all the experiences and all the things you endured during your time on Earth. And I really think there's a lot of distinctions in the creative process as well, because as a creator, you're going to put something out there, but that's going to evolve over time because you're changing as an individual as well. So
Sure.
Yeah, it's never a static, fluid thing. And I appreciate, Phillip, that you brought that to the fore of who you are as a creator, right? It's not like you want to be adaptable, but at the same time, you don't want to get necessarily pigeonholed or, defined as a certain thing. I think as a creator, you want to be as kind of, chameleon like as you can possibly be to communicate the full breadth of what you want to do.
Yeah, one of the reasons why when people talk to me about style, I divert it to voice is because people are so worried about how things look and they want to find their unique style. And I'm like, what you should really be focused on is learning. There are things that you want to learn, things you don't want to learn. First of all, if you're a visual artist, you're an illustrator, you should be learning how to draw a figure. You should be learning how to draw a face. You should be learning how to draw, arms. You should learn proportion. And once you learn all those basics, you can break the rules and do the things that you want to do. You should learn about the mediums that you like to draw and paint in, but also go outside and take a hike. Go ride the subway, go eat food that you've never had before, and worry more about learning things and experiencing things. Which, by the way, I just wanted to say that people who think that experience is everything, it's not. You want to. There's rational data and there's empirical data, and you need both. Intake stuff. Eating new food would be an empirical. It's empirical data. Eating new food, but reading about new techniques in a book, that's rational data. Until you take that data and you get yourself at the drawing table and this is how you use an elliptical template. The more you learn, it shapes your view. And so as a visual artist, you sit down to draw, a face one day, and because you're not really thinking about style, you're thinking about how you want a face to be presented instead. And the more you do that, the more that you find that you like the way you do the thing. And then you can take that thing, the way that you do it, and apply it to a genre style. So if you're going to do something comic strip like, or do something superhero like, or do something realistic, you can still do the thing that you do and adapt stylistically. Style is frosting on a cake. And I encourage artists who think about style to think about style as the result. It's superficial. There's nothing wrong with that. Style is there for a reason. It's fun to look at. It's why we're attracted to things. But the thing that you do behind the result to get there, that's where your voice comes through. And so that's what we should be. That's what artists of any discipline should be focusing on. It's just learn stuff, learn your craft, learn techniques, and then also go on a date, go climb a tree, go take photos. If you don't know how to take pictures, go take photos. If you don't know how to swim, take swimming lessons. And all these things, whether you realize it or not, shapes you as a person. And you as a person, if you're a creative person, if you're an artist, will shape the way that you approach your thing. I've been a musician my entire life. I started with piano. I moved on to clarinet. I started playing percussion. I taught myself how to, play concert drums in 8th grade. And then in 9th grade, I started with the Mandarin Shomi Bugle course. So I started to learn rudimentary percussion at a high level. And then I taught percussion. And then in 2014, I started training in Wing Chun. Taught myself how to paint, taught myself how to ink years and years and years ago. And all these things, the foods I like to eat. I went to culinary school for a year. And when I stopped teaching drums, I started thinking about, I started training in Wing Chun eventually. And I started thinking, man, if I were to go back and teach drums now, I have a whole new way of approaching how to teach a thing and how to teach a thing. And when you work at a print shop that is like fast paced and highly demanding, I've compared that to working in a kitchen. I don't work in the kitchen for very long, but there are similarities to like how you have to be able to keep things organized depending on the environment. So, if you're working for like an old school print shop that's doing modern commercial stuff, project management there might not be, as if you were working for, Salesforce or some high-end company. So, maybe you need to figure out ways to organize. Just like if you're in a professional kitchen, you need to figure out ways to organize your tickets and organize the things in your head. You got to know when to fire stuff so that things get put out into the window at the same time as somebody else's station.
Yeah.
I'm drawing now, and I can draw upon martial arts, not just in subject, but like, how fluid things are supposed to be and how things need to be adaptable and change. And I happen to really have a high affinity for Taoism. I love the philosophy of Taoism, and that's all related to the type of martial arts that I study. And then, then I sit down to draw, and taking the physicality of martial arts, I can't stiffen up. I've got minor carpal tunnel. I don't need to be, shaking and hands falling asleep while I'm drawing. All of these things shape how I approach a thing. So when I sit down at my table, I don't have to consciously think about martial arts. I don't have to consciously think about drums. I don't have to consciously think about cooking. Those things are now a part of me. I can sit down at a drawing table, and there are a few things I have to remind myself of. Don't squeeze. It's going to hurt. Relax, sit down, and try to get to a zone. And that is all helped by the things that I have learned and experienced.
I think it's
channeled.
It's definitely true that like everything we do, we see through the lens and the context of things we've done in the past. And that's what makes people unique, I think, because like the way you think about things, like everyone has like a unique, like weird combination of past experiences they've had, right? And then sometimes like those connections that you form, like, whether it's like, like you said, like, teaching, drums with like, the Wing Chun experience you gain, like those connections, like wouldn't necessarily like make sense like for anyone else to have, but like because it's like the pathway of life experiences you had, like it just is like how you perceive it. I'm thinking that like I don't know if you guys have seen that meme where it's like, oh, like if the only movie someone has seen is The Boss Baby and they watch another movie and then they say like getting a lot of Boss Baby vibes from this movie, it's kind of like that, but like real, right? Where it's just like the thing you did before is like what informs your like entire conception of the next thing. Like what I'm thinking of is I used to play Super Smash Bros competitively. Like I would go to a bunch of tournaments and stuff. And just because that was a big part of my life for a long time, like there are like a lot of elements of like that mentality that like weirdly like I like took like forward into stuff like writing and trying to break into screenwriting and all of that, because even in fields and like activities that like seemingly are entirely unrelated, like a lot of like the DNA of doing so many things boils down to like learning like new stuff or like having some sort of discipline or like overcoming some sort of like difficulty, right? And like so like there's always some element of that you can like kind of translate over, even if like the the surface skills involved are very different. So I think it's this is like the unique like mix and order of stuff that like turns people into unique individuals, and that's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, because you as a person, or we as people, there's a better way to say this. Let me start over. A person is made up of both a conscious and subconscious self. There are decisions that we make because we're conscious about them. I am, when we finish with our conversation, I'm going to go find a snack. Conscious decision. But, there are things that we do every day that are subconscious. We don't really think about it until somehow we're made aware of it. We don't think about breathing but all of a sudden we climb the stairs and all of a sudden we're out of breath. I'm like, man, I must be out of shape. So you become aware of a thing that you don't normally think about. We are comprised of both a conscious and subconscious person, and the things that become really a huge part of us, like Super Smash Brothers or cooking or whatever it is, we
Comic
don't
books.
comic books. Yeah, I mean, when I was one thing that I would do when I was teaching, and of course, one thing that I would do as a person who wanted to draw or does draw or was, like in high school and drawing comics, like, instead of paying attention in class. One thing that I would do is I would walk around is I knew, like, I would think about, well, let's say that I was thinking about drums. And I'd be thinking about a way to play a certain thing because I was going to have to teach it the next day. And that just kind of happened automatically because I was a drummer and I was a teacher. But then all of a sudden I'm thinking about a story that I wanted to write, and how would I draw that? And I'm thinking about the panel arrangement and what I want to see on the page. And because I'm in comic book mode in my brain, it kind of happens automatically. I don't just all of a sudden go, I'm going to think about comics right now. So things that become deeply a part of us, they just kind of show up automatically.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes into all of our creative endeavors. And so I think that people who are focused on trying to formulate a style instead of trying to enrich themselves to be a more learned person, more learned artist, I think they're doing themselves kind of a disservice.
No, that is really wise and good advice, Phillip. So I just want to kind of wrap things up.
Sure.
Can we start? I know you got a bunch of cons scheduled. What do you want to plug?
I'm so tired thinking about it. So next week I'm going to Ontario, down in Southern California, for Comic-Con Revolution. So that takes place on the 17th and 18th of May. And then next month I'll be in Charlotte, North Carolina for Heroes.
Nice.
I'll be working on, I'm going to be working and hopefully getting some rest on the book, because I'll be at Dragon Con, and we're hoping to get the book done and printed and released by Dragon Con. That's at the end of August. My September schedule is going to be crazy. So I've got Dragon Con, and then right after that, I've got Rose City. And then I think I got a week off. And then I'm doing Kaboom Con in Carson City, and then LA Comic Con. And I'm sure another event will be added here and there.
Okay.
But that's the con schedule I've got.
And the book coming out, can you share with us the title?
The book that I'm working on with Keith Frady is called Good Grief: The End of Talking Back. Talking Back is the name of the fictional comic strip.
Looking forward to that. And we'd like to have you back on when the book comes out and be able to promote that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That would be cool. Yeah, love to see the work, the artwork, and talk more about the concept and the story behind it. So
yeah, that'd be great.
Perfect. All right. Well, yes. Thank you so much, Phillip, for coming on. We celebrate you in this community, and go check out his work. We've dropped his website in the description, so go check him out. And Phillip, go ahead and share some of your social handles so people can follow you.
Well, thank you for the both of you, and to Nam, who left us early, and I felt abandoned, but I'll get over it. Thanks to the three of you. I had a lot of fun. Websites on screen. It's phillipginn.com. 2 L's, 2 N's. Phillip Ginn Artist. You can find me on Instagram, and I don't know why, but I just signed up for Blue Sky. I haven't posted anything yet, but if you want to find me on Blue Sky for no reason, same handle, Phillip Ginn Artist. I don't really, social media and I have a tenuous relationship, but those are the places where you're going to be able to find me. Really, if you want to interact with me, I would say one way to do that is visit my website and sign up for my email newsletter. I don't send out too many, but when I want to communicate directly with my fan base, I'll often send out an email.
Cool. There you go. All right, Phillip, get some food, and we'll connect with you down the road. Thanks, Alan.
Right.
Thanks, Phillip.
Yeah, great
Thanks, Alan
chatting
Young.
with you guys.
Thank you both. Have a great night.
Yep.